Hello to the pessimistic, optimistic, and everyone in between. My name is Connor Philippi, and welcome back to the Minnesotan Sports Podcast. And I'm sorry that this video is coming out so late in the week. Usually, I want to get these recaps of the previous week out by Tuesday, but things got in the way this week. But we're still going to roll right into it. So, we're going to be recapping the top 7 storylines I have here from week 15 of the NFL season. It was a really interesting week. A lot of teams won or lost that I didn't expect to. And this week it was fun because it was a great week of action, and I got to watch all of it because me and my dad went to Buffalo Wild Wings to watch all the games since we were both in the fantasy playoffs. Of course, all of my guys were awful. I had Eckler, trying to think of some other players that just completely ruined it for me. But I mean, Hopkins did horrible. A lot of guys didn't perform, and it wound up with me needing like 37 points from AJ Brown in on Monday Night Football. That didn't happen. Anyway, though, I'm still glad I was able to go and watch all those games, and I got a lot of storylines from it. And so we'll go over these, and also tune in for the video I'm going to be uploading later on today on Wednesday, where I'm going to be breaking down the whole playoff picture for both sides. I'm going to be doing a little bit of diving into what all can still happen and who's still in the race, but I'll mostly just be predicting who I think will end up being in the 1 through 7 spots now that we're only a few weeks away from the end of the season. So make sure you watch that video. It should be really interesting. But let's get into these storylines, starting with the Brandon Staley firing. Of course, the Raiders and the Chargers game that I thought would be at least a little bit close with a guy with the last name of Stick in at quarterback for the Chargers, and he honestly didn't do that badly. A lot of it was in garbage time though, throwing for 257 yards and 3 TDs, but no points scored in the first half, and the game ended up being 63-21. And even with Herbert being out, that kind of a loss is obviously unacceptable. And finally, Staley was fired after a lot of people were calling for his job early on into the season. This is a Chargers team that is too talented for these kinds of performances and for this kind of a record at this point in the season. I mean, this is a team that's 5-9. That yes, they lost their starting QB, but that was only last week, and they've had just so many games of underperforming, so many games where it felt like they could have won against some pretty good opponents that they just couldn't get the job done. Kind of felt like the kind of season the Vikings had early on in the season, and the Vikings turned it around, of course, and then Kirk got hurt, but that's besides the point. The Chargers never figured it out, and they just continued to lose close games, and then this game was not close, and finally it was the final straw. I think that Staley should have been fired a while ago, and this is honestly one of the best situations for a starting or for a head coach to be in next season. So it's going to be really interesting to see where the sweepstakes lead. I've heard rumblings that the Chargers would want Jim Harbaugh if he decided to go back into the NFL, but of course that is entirely up to whether or not he wants to do that, because he already decided not to once when he almost went to Minnesota and didn't. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But very good situation, a very juicy situation for a head coach to potentially wind up in, with a great elite level quarterback and some pretty good names on that defense as well. One thing I think also, Bill Belichick, speaking of coaches that people are hearing rumblings about, I think he's getting too much hate. I think we're getting way too ahead of ourselves right now because, yes, a lot of people are saying Bill Belichick only got where he got because of Tom Brady, but let's not forget those were also some very good teams. And we've seen what head coaches can do with these kinds of teams, because Tom Brady is the best quarterback of all time, but he's still just one guy. And Bill Belichick took a lot of players that wouldn't necessarily do well on other rosters, and he made them good. I mean, the fact that Julian Edelman was the one of the MVPs of a couple of Super Bowls he played in, I mean, he was not necessarily the best, most athletic freak type of player. Bill Belichick was just so good at utilizing players in the way. I mean, there were players that no one even knew who they were, and they were getting touchdowns week after week. And Danny Amendola was scoring on your favorite defensive player at the time, and Bill Belichick was finding out ways to do that. So you can't just say that he was carried by Tom Brady. And then Tom Brady leaves, you've got Mac Jones in, you've got other quarterbacks in, in his absence before Mac Jones was drafted, and Bill Belichick is so under fire for this 1 week and this one season where that he's 3-11. But let's not forget that the Patriots didn't quite make the playoffs, but they almost made the playoffs with some pretty questionable rosters the last couple seasons. I mean, if you look at some of the teams that he had in the years following Brady's departure, these are not teams that should have been even in the consideration for the playoffs. And Bill Belichick got the Patriots to the playoffs against the Bill. They obviously got demolished against the Bills that season, but he made a team that should never have even been in that conversation. He got them to the playoffs. The year after, he almost made it again. And this is his one really bad year he's had ever with the Patriots. And all of a sudden, people are just putting him under fire. I mean, it's crazy. If you were to balance, okay, who ended up having the most success, it was probably Brady because he was able to go to a completely different team and led that team to the Super Bowl. But to say that Belichick should all of a sudden just be let go from the Patriots after everything he did for them and all the things he was able to accomplish even after Brady left, I think it's pretty ridiculous. He's getting way too much hate right now. The 49ers, there is no one close to them right now. That's the next storyline. You look at the NFC and they stand alone. They are dominating every single team they play. I mean, their first drive against the Cardinals, you already knew this was not going to be close, and they ended up winning that one 45-29, which is actually closer than anyone thought it would be. Deebo Samuel with an incredible performance. Christian McCaffrey is just on a whole other level. I mean, no one can stop him. Brock Purdy threw 4 touchdowns in this game. I mean, I don't care if anyone says he is the product of the system he's in, all that stuff. Who cares? The 49ers are winning games like crazy, and he's a part of it. The 49ers faltered one time this season, and besides that, they've been unstoppable. I don't think there's any team in the entire league that you could say is even in the conversation for being as good as the 49ers are right now. And it's a point of domination that I haven't seen one team be this dominant while all the other teams are kind of in the mix. I haven't seen that in a while now. And that leads to the fourth storyline, which is who is the second best team in the NFC? And you can make, because I'll put it this way. I think we all know, and I think I am very confident at this point, the Eagles are going to be the second seed. And it's just because of all the tiebreakers that they have. They can win out now and still be over the Dallas Cowboys and win the East. And they've got the easiest schedule left throughout the rest of the league. The Cowboys and then the Lions, of course, aren't going to have the conference tiebreaker over the Eagles, even if they remain tied by the end of the season. With the Lions having some tough matchups, the Vikings are not going to go away, and then they also have to play the Cowboys near the end of the season. Even if that weren't to happen, the strength of victory is stronger for the Eagles, so the Eagles are going to get the second seed, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're the second best team. And so it's a really difficult conversation. The Eagles just lost to the Seahawks with Drew Lock in. I don't care how well he played by his own standards in that game. That cannot happen. You cannot lose to Drew Lock. And then the Lions have looked not like themselves for a few games in the last 4 or 5 weeks. But if you look at the games they've played, I mean, the Ravens, the Seahawks, and then the Packers and Bears are the only teams they've lost to. So it's kind of a thing where they haven't gotten their butts handed to them by any good teams besides the Ravens, but they also haven't played any good teams. So it kind of feels like a similar situation to the Vikings last year, where it's like, okay, until they actually play in the playoffs, we don't know what we're going to see or even expect from this Lions team. So you can't really say they're the second best. It comes down to the Eagles and Cowboys for who's the next best team in this conference. And who do you even say at this point? I've got to go with the Cowboys because they got absolutely destroyed by the Bills this last week. And yes, we all know that when the Cowboys hit the playoffs, they're not going to be able to move out of the divisional round, assuming they win in the first round. But regular season wise, I feel like the Cowboys are still the better team because they've still put up more impressive wins as of late. You know, they've come up and Dak Prescott, despite how poorly he played in the last game, has actually played really well throughout this season. The Dallas Cowboys defense is still great, and the Eagles just feel like something is off. And I can't put my finger on exactly what it is. Jalen Hurts, his injuries with his leg problems and everything like that could have something to do with it, but he's still running the ball plenty. I mean, it's really just a situation where the Eagles are not playing like themselves right now, and if they can figure it out before the end of the season, then they can get back up to that second best in the NFC spot. But right now, it's a toss up. There's no one close to the 49ers right now in this conference. The next storyline here are the Bills back. You know, we just talked about the Cowboys being still one of the better teams in the NFC East and the NFC, and the Bills just beat them 31-10. They're up to 8-6. They still need to take care of the rest of their still pretty difficult schedule, including, well, really the last difficult matchup of their season is against the Dolphins in the final week of the season, which could end up coming down to who wins that division, with the Dolphins having some really tough matchups coming up the next few weeks. But the Bills are looking really good now. You know, Josh Allen didn't have to do anything passing the ball in this game, and it was still dominant. James Cook ran for 179 yards and a touchdown, and that was only on 25 carries. I mean, the defense was also really the story in this one. The Cowboys had no leg to stand on, and the Bills seemed to want to make a statement. And that's why I think that this Bills team is the most dangerous team right now. Not necessarily more dangerous than the 49ers, but they're one of the most dangerous teams right now because they have so much to prove. And the Bills, I feel like, are one of those teams that like being the underdog. And honestly, I feel like playing away games this season could end up helping them more than hurting them because they like that underdog mindset. They like the fact that they have to prove people wrong. And that's why they came into this game with such a vengeance. And that's why I feel like they're really dangerous against better teams. And the reason why they've lost to some of the worst teams that they've played is when the expectations are higher for them, it seems like they do worse. And so in the playoffs, the Bills might be really dangerous. And I think they might be back here. And we'll have to see how Josh Allen does in the next game where he's forced to throw the ball a lot and whether or not those turnovers end up continuing to be a bane on this team. But we'll have to see. Cowboys can't win on the road. That's the second to last storyline. The Cowboys are 10-4 right now. They're 3-4 away. And the Cowboys are going to have to accept the fact that the Eagles are most likely going to win this division. So the Cowboys are going to be playing from the road the entire playoffs, and I just don't know. I don't think they're going to get past the second round again. You know, I do expect them to get the fifth seed and beat whatever team ends up coming out of the NFC South because that's a really bad division. But then after they play that NFC South team, they would have to either play away against the Eagles or the 49ers. And neither of those teams are very forgiving at home. And the Cowboys just haven't done anything away throughout the course of this season. I mean, they've been horrible away. And, you know, it seems like there's a certain rhythm that this offense gets into when they can hear themselves and when the home crowd is super quiet for them. And then once that gets disrupted, when they're in an away environment, they just have no leg to stand on. And that's the formula for a really bad playoff run coming up for the Cowboys. And even though I think that they're on paper the second best team in the NFC, I just don't expect them to do anything in the playoffs. And I already talked about that, but you know, might as well still throw some more on the Cowboys because everyone likes that. Now, the next question: who is the MVP right now in the league? And this is a very tough question, but I have to answer it with one player. And it's either, in my opinion, this it doesn't happen very often, and it probably won't happen this way because it's always a quarterback every single year. And in my opinion, anyway, the two best teams that make the biggest impact on the teams that they're on, Christian McCaffrey and Tyreek Hill. And I don't think either of them will win it based on the NFL standards, but based on my standards, it's got to be one of those two. Christian McCaffrey goes onto that field, and no other running back looks like him. He can do things in the passing game. In the running game, he is simply unstoppable. 18 carries for 115 yards. That's, if you do the math on that, that's 6 yards per carry, more than 6 yards per carry throughout the course of a game. And when the 49ers are up by a touchdown late in a game and they hand it off to McCaffrey, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. And no other running back has had that much of an impact on an offense since maybe AP. Or maybe, okay, prime Derrick Henry probably as well. But I just feel like it's between him and Tyreek, because Tyreek, on the other hand, yes, he wasn't in against the Jets and the Dolphins still won, but it's the Jets. So you can't give any sort of credence to that. And then, I mean, Tyreek Hill just changes the whole offense whenever he's out there. Tyreek Hill is the league is different because he's on the field, and you can feel his presence, his speed everywhere you go. It's tough. I still have to go with Christian McCaffrey, though. I think Christian McCaffrey should be the MVP of the league right now. He is just unstoppable, and it's tough to really pick anyone else for that spot. But anyway, those are my 7 storylines for the rest of this week 15. I'm going to really quick do a fastest 3 minutes, so to speak, of all the games and just kind of go over the top thing from each game real quickly. Already talked about Raiders, Chargers, Vikings, Bengals, already talked about them. Steelers, Colts. The Steelers offense has no leg to stand on right now, and Minshew Mania is reaching its full peak right now as the Colts are 8-6 and are in the playoff picture as of right now. The Steelers, whatever magic they had on defense, you can't make up for how poorly this offense has been playing with Mitch Trubisky in. Lions, Broncos. The Lions showing flashes once again of this offense. The only question is, can they keep up this kind of offensive performance against a really good team like the 49ers or something like that? The Lions are just a team that we have to wait and see how they do in the actual playoffs, because the Broncos aren't a very good measuring point of who you're going to be up against come playoff time, and the Cowboys will be a really good measurement of that later on in the season. Browns beat the Bears 20-17. I can't believe the Bears had the Hail Mary pass in their on a player's chest, and they still lost the game. I mean, that's such a Bears way to lose. Joe Flacco was on his couch a few weeks ago, and he just threw for 374 yards. Unbelievable performance by him. Buccaneers beat the Packers 34-20. Love to see the fact that the Packers are kind of in that flux state where Jordan Love is doing just well enough for them where they don't want to make a decision to move away from him, but also Jordan Love is not doing well enough where it feels like he's going to lead the Packers deep at any point in his career. So it's a great place for a Vikings fan to see the Packers in, because that flux state is where the Vikings have been so often in their history. Texans beat the Titans 19-16. They win this game without Stroud. The Titans, man, they're just rough. I mean, offensively, when Derrick Henry is not the focal point of their offense, they fall apart. Dolphins kill the Jets 30-0. Officially putting an end to the rumors that Rodgers might play at some point this season. Dolphins with a really impressive victory without Tyreek. Waddle with a big statement, and the Dolphins are also a very dangerous team going into the playoffs because of that offense. Chiefs beat the Patriots 27-17, a game that really shouldn't have even been that close. Mahomes puts up 2 interceptions but still throws 305 yards, and the Chiefs, simply beat a team that is not good. Giants lose to the Saints 24-6. Impressive win for the Saints, even without Chris Olave, but we'll have to see what the Saints can actually do against a good team, because once again, the Giants and DeVito's magic is a little bit up. The Giants are not a good team. The Saints need to prove it against a better team, but right now they are tied with the Bucs for the division lead. Speaking of the division lead, the Panthers beat the Falcons 9-7, and the Falcons have a really rough chance now of getting back into the divisional spot right now, and they would obviously not make the playoffs if they don't make that spot. Man, how do you lose? How do you only score 7 points against the Panthers? Just embarrassing. Bijan Robinson with a really bad performance today, and the Falcons lose. Rams beat the Commanders 28-20 in a game that ended up being really close after an injury for the Commanders, and Brissett comes in and actually plays really well, but the Rams end up winning this one 28-20. Stafford actually with a really good performance. Already talked about the 49ers, Cardinals, and Cowboys, Bills. Ravens defeat the Jaguars 23-7, and Lawrence actually played pretty well in this game, but at the end of it, the Jags just couldn't get it done in the red zone, and the Ravens defense really shone in this game, and somehow Lawrence put up enough for me to still be down by a bunch in my fantasy with only 7 points on the board. Very annoying that he got that one deep throw for the touchdown, but no one wants to hear about your fantasy team. I get it. Seahawks win 20-17 over the Eagles in one of the biggest upsets this year. Drew Lock leads the Seahawks past, and the Seahawks now have a really good chance of getting into the playoffs, and the Eagles have a lot of time now to think about what they need to do to fix some of the things that are wrong with this team as they get ready for the playoffs in a few weeks. Have a few really easy matchups coming up, so the Eagles better win those games, otherwise they're going to have even more people talking about them. But anyway, that will do it for this video. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think about this week, how it all went down, and what you're looking forward to as we head into the last few weeks of the NFL season. Thanks so much again, and I'll see you on the flip side.